Welcome to another edition of We Need to Talk About Movies, brought to you by banterflix.com. And now, here's your host, Jim McLean.
Hello. Yes, I am indeed your host, Jim McLean. Welcome to the latest episode of We Need to Talk About Movies, a podcast brought to you by the Northern Irish movie review website, Banterflix. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, then first and foremost, let me thank you for giving it a listen, and hopefully you'll enjoy what you hear, and you'll want to subscribe wherever you get your podcasting fix to make sure you never miss another episode. But you also might want to check out our website, www.banterflix.com, where you'll find the complete back catalogue, not only of this podcast, but also our sister podcasts, Crime Scene to Screen, hosted by Banterflix's resident sleuth sisters, Joe McElroy and Therese Ray, and our cosplay podcast, Talking Cosplay, hosted by Gabrielle Ridioff. So we have loads of content there for you, and maybe this isn't your first time listening. Maybe you've been listening to us for a while. Maybe you're even one of our patrons. If you are, you know who you are, and a massive thank you from all of us here at the Banterflix team, because you help make this all happen, and you keep me out of mischief, so that's all I can say. So we have a packed show as always this week. I'm going to be catching up with local filmmaker Brian Muholland as we talk about Shang Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. We have a slightly spoilerific chat about Marvel's latest movie, but it's great to have Brian on. We haven't spoke to him on the pod for quite some time, but because it is a Marvel movie, we had to get our own comic book guru, Aaron Flanagan from the Comic Book Guys, to give us the 101 on the characters. So as always, that's a lot of fun to listen to as well. You'll also hear me chatting with filmmaker Phyllida Lloyd about her latest feature, Herself. It's out in cinemas this weekend, and I would definitely recommend seeking it out. Everything we've done this week is once again recorded via Zoom, so apologies in advance. There is, as always, the odd little audio glitch. Hopefully it won't affect your enjoyment too much of the pod. And so that's enough of me rambling. I think we'll get stuck into the show, and because we were talking about Shang-Chi, Brian Muholland suggested we have a chat about Marvel's What If series that's currently on Disney+. So let's get stuck in, and let's play a clip of Marvel's What If.
Air support! Send air support!
Copy that. Rogers, inbound.
Steve?
Rogers? What in heavens?
Steve!
Hey, Peggy. Now you owe me one.
Hold on a second. She's friends with that Hydra Stomper?
I think I'm friends with him, too.
So that's a clip of Marvel's What If, and I'm joined now by Brian Muholland, Belfast's own Captain America. Hello to you, Brian.
Batang, how are you, Jim? You well?
I'm good, Brian. So we're going to be talking about a load of things on this podcast, but just before we start to record, you mentioned you've been watching Marvel's What If, and I thought then it would give us a perfect opportunity to talk about the series. I've been enjoying it, I have to say. I think it's been quite clever, and in the wake of the revelations about what Loki has set up, I know last week we were talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, I think the Marvel What Ifs have become much more important to an extent, because they are now showing to an extent aspects of the multiverse. I've been enjoying them. I know we're recording on a Tuesday, so there will be another episode dropping tomorrow. The last week's Doctor Strange episode I thought was absolutely fab. What's been your thoughts on the Marvel What If?
I've loved the season. Obviously, I've been invested interest because I'm Marvel up the hoo-ha. You know, I love Marvel, and I'm well into the MCU. I did not know it was going. I thought it was just going to be a companion piece, basically Marvel, and like the comics were back in the day with What Ifs. You know, it's a your fantasy football. It's kind of like fantasy comic book. You know, you're sitting around with your friends and going, imagine if. You know, I remember years ago I had a "What if Punisher became Captain America" issue, so you can imagine what Frank Castle with the Shield went down like. But yeah, no, they've been great. But now kind of seeing Easter eggs, and it's not really a character that's shown up twice, but there's been definitely some otherworldly, I suppose, monster has shown up twice, and it's kind of, and I'm thinking, well, this is going to have a little bit more to do with the MCU, or indeed the next Doctor Strange and the multiverse. You know, it's going to maybe have a little bit more in it. So I've been totally loving it. You know, I love the first one. I thought Peggy Carter becoming basically, you know, the first Avenger was stunning. The animation was great, and it's great to kind of hear those voices again. You know, and also then the last one was easily the best one so far, the Doctor Strange one, because I'm sitting watching it going, you're kind of giving all these ideas away. Like, what have you got planned for the sequel of the movie? Because this stuff was so inventive, you know, and the animation was so good, and it was really, really dark, which is always nice when, you know, heroes aren't always the winners type of thing. You know, I don't know if anyone's seen it, don't want to spoil too much, but I just thought that's how to tell a story. You know, really, really enjoying the season. Absolutely.
I thought the Doctor Strange episode was probably my favorite as well. I mean, I quite liked the idea. I think the episode before that, what if not Doctor Strange, what if Nick Fury never got Earth's mightiest heroes together? I thought it was quite clever. But what I just loved about the Doctor Strange episode, because it was one of those ones, and I don't want to go too spoilerific, it went a bit Groundhog Day, but it had a real emotional impact with me, I have to say. I mean, I know it's animated, and I'm not going to be piffy and talk down about animation, because I've also been watching Dog Days on Disney, and I even teared up at that. Hey, regular listeners will know I tear up at anything, but I love Dog Days, which is just great. But that episode of Doctor Strange, before it goes down, for me anyway, a rather unexpected path, and I don't want to talk too much about it, there's that aspect of that episode that plays out like Groundhog Day, where we see Doctor Strange trying to kind of come back to the same situation, trying to do something differently, and it really, really got to me emotionally, and I thought it's been great. I'm not sure how many episodes in total are in the run. I know, what are we at now, 4 or 5 episodes in?
Tomorrow night's Wednesday nights it will be the 5th one. I think there's 7 or 8 maybe. I could be wrong, but yeah.
And even the T'Challa episode, I thought we haven't even mentioned it. I just mean, considering, you know, what's happened in real life there, I just thought that was an absolute fab episode as well.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Doctor Strange one as well, just hearing you talking there, is he's very powerful, and that's the thing that you can pay. You know, after the first one, we've all seen the first movie. Well, sure, you can just do that same thing every single time. You know, you can just turn back time. Then once you introduce time travel to that, then why can't you just constantly keep using it? But this was an example of, well, you can't really. You know, there is something more than just, you know, there's something inherent that will always happen. You know, and he can't. Well, he tries his best to right what he thinks is wrongs, but it's not always that easy. So I think it almost depowers him, if you know what I mean, to a certain extent. You know, so I enjoyed it. I mean, it has more layers than a lot of the movies out there. You know, really well done.
I get a sense, I know the answer to this before I even ask you, Brian, but I know last week with Victoria and Joe, we were talking, albeit briefly, about the MCU, and now that it's really just embracing the concept of the multiverse. We're only kind of at the tip of the iceberg, really. You know, we've only seen the trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home. We know kind of through, you know, to an extent with What If, that it has more meaning than what it maybe had when we first heard that it was commissioned. And then we know as the series goes on and the movies goes on that the multiverse is going to become a much bigger aspect in Marvel's Phase 4. But again, I know the answer here. You're a Marvel fanboy. Are you excited by the concept of the multiverse being on the big screen, or do you think this is where possibly it might start to get a bit muddled? Because I know I've said this before. I was someone who when I was younger, I would have read mostly Spider-Man, and then as I got older, I moved into DC and stuff like that, DC and Batman, etc., and things like that. But I know from me as a casual reader now, anytime I find myself dipping my toes in anything, like any of the big Marvel stuff, even the big DC stuff, I was talking a couple of days ago to Aaron Flanagan, who's on the show later, like about stuff like DC Metal. When it starts to get that big, it loses me as a casual reader. I'm wondering, will casual viewers who maybe don't want to get invested in every single TV show, don't want to get invested in every single movie, if the multiverse might be the point where they go, you know what, maybe I'm out. But this is the point where you're going to say, no, Jim, you're wrong. We have every reason to be really excited about the multiverse.
Okay, I'll start by answering that. After the Avengers Endgame, you imagine what the MCU is going to be like, and I was quite worried because I'm like, well, you're not going to have Iron Man, you're not going to have Captain America. A lot of these characters that you've spent 10 years building up, they aren't going to be there. And who you bringing in now? We're comic book fans, so I know Shang Chi, I know that Doctor Strange, and all right, Spidey's still there. But if you put a poster on your wall of the next lot of the Magnificent Seven in the new MCU, who's it going to be, and will those be household names? But in saying that, WandaVision, Loki, the What Ifs, less so Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because it was a little bit different. They've all kind of, I'm imagining where it's going now, and I'm excited because they're going to do something different. You can't just be, I know there's rumors of a big bad being Kang, who again is time travel again and everything else, all interdimensional and stuff. But he can't just be another Thanos, we've seen that. You have to do something different. You can't have, like, in Justice League where Darkseid comes down and, does the exact same, or tries to do the same thing, that we're going to take over your planet. Oh, really? Well, we've done that before. So the fact that they're thinking outside the box, and they're really good at bringing the audience along with them. Like, for instance, we're going to, I'm sure, talk about Shang Chi, but I thought as an origin movie that no one probably knows who this character is. I'm like, well, it has its own self-contained mythology. It develops the character. There's an arc to him, and surrounding characters. And then you go, by the way, this guy's going to be hanging out with Spider-Man maybe, and you're going, okay, well then take my money. That's ultimately what they have done the previous with Phase 1 and onwards, the 10 years, and that what they do with this, you get to play that fantasy of, right, is the Hulk going to be hanging out with Doctor Strange again, and blah blah blah. So I'm excited. I'm more excited now after the Disney Plus TV series shows than I was when the big first Marvel 10 years ended, the Avengers.
Okay, well, look, we have that to look forward to. And as you say, we are going to be talking about Shang-Chi. But just before we get into talking about that, there is other films that are out this week. One of those is probably as far as you can possibly think of from Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings. But we have Phyllida Lloyd, who viewers will know is the director of Mamma Mia. She directed The Iron Lady. She has went for something completely different on her latest project. She is directing the film herself, which is a feature set in Ireland. A couple of weeks ago, I got a chance to speak to her via Zoom, and here's that interview.
It's land, Sandra, going to waste. Use it. Build a house for you and your girls.
Why would you do this?
Your mother was far more than a cleaner to me. She was a friend. She helped me through some bloody awful times. I want to give you the land and lend you the money to build your house.
No, that's mad. You can't.
I can. You can pay me back over as many years as we decide. What do you say? Is that a yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, now, get back to work. Good woman.
So that's a look at the trailer for Herself, which hits cinemas on the 10th of September. The film stars Claire Dunn, who also co-wrote the film's screenplay with Malcolm Campbell. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the film's director. Phyllida Lloyd. Hello to you.
Hello. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for giving up your time. I want to start. Can you tell our viewers and tell our listeners a little bit about herself?
It's a story of a woman, Sandra, who is trying to put her past behind her. It's about somebody trying to get away from an abusive relationship with two small children. And it has elements of a thriller about it. Will Sandra be able to rebuild her life, or will her past somehow overwhelm her? It's full of dark and light. It takes a subject of domestic violence and treats it in quite an unusual way. I think we've seen maybe the film about the battered woman before, but I think that Claire Dunn, who wrote it, is speaking, not just to those of us who are lucky to feel safe in our homes, but also trying to offer up some vision of hope for people who might be in this situation.
Yeah, I did want to say, and I'm sure we'll come back to this, for a film that deals with a lot of heavy and dark subject matter. You've touched on domestic abuse. There's elements there again, and something that's a big issue in Ireland, I suppose everywhere. The housing crisis, is a massive thing within Dublin. But it's also a film that's, also quite light. It deals with the power of community and the kindness of strangers, which I thought was a really great way of bringing viewers into that story and engaging with them. And I will come back to that, because I know you've mentioned that Claire co-wrote the film's screenplay, but how did you actually get involved with this project? Because yourself and Claire, you've worked together, and you've also worked with Harriet Walter, who's in this feature as well. Can you take us back and see how you got involved with the project?
Yes, so the three of us were working in the theatre on a series of Shakespeare plays, an all-female company of Shakespeare plays set in a women's prison. And we've been working together for a couple of years, and we were very preoccupied by the number of women we met in prison who had come from childhoods of domestic violence, or they had, struck out against an abusive partner and ended up in jail. And this was very much what we were concerned by, and the voicelessness of these women. And at the same time, Claire had a friend who was her landlord, wanted to sell the property she was living in, so she had to leave with two small kids. And there was literally nowhere for her that she could afford to live in Dublin, no social housing, nothing. And she had to declare herself homeless. And Claire was so kind of outraged by what was going on that she sat down to write this story. And at first I thought, she showed it to me, and I was really struck by the tone of it, by the freshness of it. It was taking on some way a familiar subject, but treating it in a very different way. And I didn't think I was necessarily the person to direct it. I thought maybe it needed an Irish director, someone who really knew the landscape. And then I just got gradually more and more drawn into the process, the journey that Claire was on. And I began to think, well, this situation, this lack of social housing crisis is not unique to Ireland. It's very much a UK story, a New York story, etc. And I thought maybe if I can be sure that I am, listening to Claire enough and embed myself, honestly enough in Dublin, then bringing a kind of global perspective on it, could help enhance its potential as a sort of universal story. And the other thing was that Claire, in a typically, I've told this story before, but, when she was playing Prince Hal in Henry IV, and I was asking her to kind of act as if she owned the world, and she was being a bit of a shrinking violet, I used to say to her, how many Irish women does it take to change a light bulb? And we would both say together, oh no, and forgive my accent, but we would say, no, I'll be grand here alone in the dark. And it was sort of like, forget, keeping your light under a bushel. She was thinking of not playing the lead in the film. She was going to play a small sister role that she'd written, thinking she couldn't expect to get the film made and play the lead in it. That was just asking too much. So I just thought, actually, hang on a bloody minute, this girl is, an acting phenomenon and knows this role. She so knows who Sandra is and what she's got to do. And so that's when I thought, okay, maybe if I do sort of step forward and say, I really, really passionately want to direct this, I could insist, that she played the lead and somehow help. And then when we found Sharon Horgan and Ed Guiney, that we had the greatest producers and support in that kind of mission.
I did want to touch on that because I've seen the film twice now. I've seen it at Dublin when it closed the festival, if I remember correctly. And I've watched it in prep for this interview. I got to see it as a screener, and I have to say I'm a big fan of it. It reminds me a lot of films like Paddy Bretna's Rosie. It's a fantastic conversation starter for a film, and I think I watched an interview where Claire described it as a lighthouse of a film that, someone watching this, whether it's at the cinema or whether at home, who's maybe going through a similar situation might see that as a symbol of hope. And I think that's a fantastic, idea and motif behind the film. But just in relation to what you mentioned, that I can't imagine her not playing that role. I mean, did at any point did you have to give her a push to go for that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about, how many Irish women does it take to change a light bulb? Because her lack of sort of vanity, this was so not a vanity project. It was like just she wanted to get it made and she didn't care, about her acting career. But the fact was, she was really struggling to get work on screen. And I just thought that was an outrage. And that's how, we ended up pushing it forward onto this, to get me pushing it forward to get her cast.
Yeah, I think she's tremendous in the film. What's your memory of the shoot? I think, was it a 5-week shoot you had? It was quite a tight turnaround. How was that process?
Yeah, it really was. Every move, it sort of doesn't seem to matter whether it's 4 months shoot or 5 weeks. It's a siege. And so this was, there wasn't much time to change your mind or stand and stare, but that's normal in movies. And I think because Claire and Harriet and I had worked together for so long, we were able to work with economy and we didn't waste any time on sort of, on other stuff. And the whole unit, the whole crew, I wanted to work on a low budget film for a long time, and I felt it would meet the work I was doing in the theatre more truthfully in terms of slightly social mission driven work. And so bringing together this small crew, working with this small crew, a lot of whom knew Claire from the theatre, and of course felt passionately about the housing crisis and the subject matter. And so it really felt like, in many ways, it was the sort of the mehel that's mentioned in the film. The actual making of it was that kind of collaborative sense of community. And it was, coming to work in Ireland, it was sort of everything I'd dreamt of in terms of a lower budget, independent atmosphere.
I do want to ask, what it was like filming in Ireland. And just before I do, this is I think it's your 4th feature you've worked on. You've mentioned you come from theatre background. Now, particularly, I suppose, working on this project and going on to your next project, you seem to be a filmmaker who picks their projects very carefully. But I just want to see, how have you found that process? How have you evolved as a filmmaker over those periods to where you are now? Because I would imagine theatre's quite organic. It's a lot of moving parts. Film is quite stop and start. How have you found your process? Do you feel your process has changed, evolved throughout those four films?
Yeah, I've had a very odd journey in a way. I had made one small indie film before I did Mamma Mia, a very small thing. But the journey from Mamma Mia via The Iron Lady to this has been the opposite of what most people aspire to, which is to get, bigger and bigger budgets and projects. In many ways, I was sort of threw myself into the Mamma Mia experience. I mean, I'm both kind of, it's funny, it's probably the most sort of loved and hated film in the history of cinema. It's like I was sort of vilified for my the clunkiness of its shooting. And in many ways, it was kind of me chasing Meryl Streep and friends round a Greek island with my handy cam. That's how I kind of felt it. And, I didn't really, I know, sort of follow any of the sort of prescribed rules of how musical movies should be shot. And I think I was definitely vilified for that amongst cineasts. And then, at the same time, it's a sort of cult movie for various people, which is a kind of weird thing. And I sort of totally own its clunkiness. And in some way, it's a mixture of, cock up and intention. And I think that The Iron Lady, I feel very ambivalent about. I think that I feel incredibly proud of having sort of sat alongside Meryl on that journey. It was, especially the performance as the old Margaret Thatcher. It was one of those things where to be in the room with her, watching that through the camera, was sort of a mind-blowing, life-changing experience, not just for me, but for any of the actors who were part of it. I'm never going to do, famous last words, I'm never going to do another biopic again. I just feel it's an absolute poison chalice, especially if you're making a biopic about someone who's still alive. And in many ways, the part of the film that Abby Morgan created, which was entirely imagined, of the old Margaret Thatcher, is much the most successful part of it. The sort of roller coaster through her memory of her glory days, the sort of aggrandized, sort of hyperbolic memories is very sort of on some way, you had to include certain things for people to understand it about Margaret Thatcher, but it was a kind of, it worked much better in other cultures where the nations were not so polarized about Thatcher herself. But about my filmmaking, it was quite a self-conscious sort of visual landscape that Elliot Davis, who is a brilliant cinematographer, and helped me a lot. But it's quite a self-conscious sort of scheme where, the old parts of Margaret Thatcher was all shot quite detachedly, but her memories were all incredibly heightened and hyperbolic. And I wanted, with this film, with herself, to strip away all of that and just strip away myself from it and really just, have a very, very simple language. And of course, simple is often, you decide you're going to shoot a scene on one shot, and it can take you all day because even you've got 5 weeks and you haven't got time to spend all day on one scene. But you can get real simplicity can often be really lengthy process. But I'm prouder of it, I think, in terms of the craft of it, because I think it fits the medium, the method fits the story better than perhaps my previous work. So I hope I'm getting better at it gradually.
One thing just that struck me, just as you were going through both, I suppose, Mamma Mia and Iron Lady, and I should add at this point, I was told by my lovely wife to say that she is a huge fan of Mamma Mia, as am I. I mean, you give the world Pierce Brosnan singing, so what is not to rejoice in that? But just listening to you, it's herself, Mamma Mia, and Iron Lady, they all have and feature prominently strong women. and I don't know, I don't really want to go down that way too much, but I mean, I would say in many senses, Sandra is possibly the strongest of those women you featured. I mean, is that something you look for when you're picking projects? Do you look as a filmmaker for projects that feature strong women?
Yeah, I think right from the beginning of my career, and I think it was because I went to an all-girls school where, we played all the parts and thought we could do anything and everything. So when I came out into the real world and found we were only, allowed a small slice of the cake, I was a bit disconcerted and sort of scurried around looking for projects right from the beginning in my 20s that featured, that had women at the center of them. So it's been a very natural process to sort of, I guess it's hidden histories, it's sort of untold stories. I mean, Thatcher obviously isn't a hidden history. She's sort of the most prominent political leader we've had since Elizabeth I, possibly. But yeah, it's a natural thing to go for, to look for the girls' stories, partly because there just haven't been so many told.
I know there's lots of things I do want to ask you, but I know we are pushed for time. And I mentioned just before we started to record that the film played at Dublin. I actually got a chance to speak to yourself and Claire on the red carpet.
Yeah.
What's your memories of that? That must feel like a lifetime ago now, because I know the film played at Sundance, it played at Dublin, I'm sure it played at other film festivals around that time. But how's it been as a filmmaker to have been on the promotional tour for a film that has predated the pandemic and has now been going through the pandemic? How have you found that process?
Yeah, I mean, the coming to Dublin to show it to a home crowd was, possibly the proudest moment, and to be able to sort of go, I felt like, Claire's third parent, really, that day, just being able to see her celebrated in her hometown and feel the kind of response of the audience. It was a pretty enormous thing. As a filmmaker, you want your work to be seen on the big screen. And having had it, first of all, we saw it at Sundance, and that was, unbelievable, because we were on sort of in the biggest cinema, on the biggest screen, gigantic screen, huge cinema, totally sold out. And to see Claire, get up on stage at the end and everybody stand up and applaud her, it was just such a huge public and thing. And also the way that in America, when they feel something, they make a noise. So during the watching of the film, the audience, it was like, oh no, and these kind of gasps of outrage or laughter, and very, very, it was a real sort of communal experience. So when the pandemic struck and gradually, Amazon, who'd bought it in America, then said they wanted to get it out there and they wanted to put it out on Amazon Prime, one's first thought is, oh, ouch, it's going straight to digital. Oh, God. But what about all those communal, movie experiences? But at the same time, when Claire and I started to get feedback from Amazon and look online and see people going, God, this is my story. I watched this on Amazon Prime. This is my mother. This is a story that people who are going through this must see. I actually thought, get over yourself. In this instance, it doesn't matter that it's going in America anyway, straight to a digital streaming platform. But that said, I am now so excited at the thought of it opening in Ireland and, just seeing what people make of it, especially post-pandemic, when I just think we are experiencing everything differently, whether it's, a night out at the pub or, it's all different because we've all had our lives changed by what we've been through. And the film's themes of community and isolation are, that's what we've been experiencing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm a massive fan of the film. It's out in cinemas, as we said, on the 10th of September, and I would recommend anybody watching this interview or listening to this, seek it out, because right now, if you want to get something slightly different, because we are overloaded with blockbusters right now, this is something slightly different, you know, get there and watch it. So all that is left for me to say now is, Phyllida Lloyd, thank you very much for your time and good luck with the film.
Thanks so much for having me.
So that's my interview with Phyllida Lloyd, and herself is out in cinemas now, and I definitely recommend seeking it out. And as I've said many times when I'm talking about this movie, I know we reviewed it on the TV show this week as well, just Claire Dunn is just absolutely fantastic in that feature. And I think it's a film, Brian, that even, you know, you're someone who loves stories and loves to champion Irish storytellers, and I think we've definitely seen the emergence of that with Claire Dunn. I know we haven't seen the film, so I'll not push you too much. But as I say, we are going to be talking primarily about Shang Chi. We're going to be using the podcast now to talk about the bigger blockbusters and using the TV show to talk about the more kind of indie stuff, and particularly Irish cinema that we want to champion, because cinema is back. So why not champion the local storytellers on the TV show? And we can talk about big stuff like this in more sweary, nonsensical way on the podcast. But before we get into sharing our thoughts on the film, Brian, we always used to do a feature, particularly when new releases or new comic book heroes were emerging on the scene that people might not be as familiar with. We always used to do a feature with Aaron Flanagan from the Comic Book Guys called Comic Book 101. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to catch up with Aaron, and he would give us the Comic Book 101 on Shang-Chi.
I should also probably mention that my name's not technically Sean.
What is it?
It's Shang Chi.
Shang Chi.
No, Shang Chi.
Shang Chi.
Shang.
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 S-H-A-N-G. Shang.
Shang?
Yeah.
You changed your name from Shang to Sean?
Yeah, I don't...
I wonder how your father found you.
I was 15 years old, all right?
What is your name change logic? You going into hiding and your name is Michael, you want to change it to Michael.
That's not what happened.
It's like, hi, my name's Gina. I'm going to go into hiding. My new name's Gina.
So I'm joined now by Aaron Flanagan from the Comic Book Guys, Banterflix's go-to guy when we need a comic book guru. And we're going to be talking about Shang-Chi. We're going to be talking about the character's comic book origins. And this is where we bring you in, Aaron, to not talk about the latest movie, but more so to talk about the character's comic book origins, some recommended reads. Maybe there's some comic book series going on at the minute that might be a good jumping on point for anybody who's caught the movie at the cinema and now wants to delve a little bit deeper. So, Aaron, you know, first and foremost, how are you? How have you been keeping?
Good. Class, Jim, thank you.
a man of many words.
No, Joe, I'm brilliant. I'm much better now. And, you know, everything seems to be starting to settle down again. It's lovely to see films back out in the cinema, actually. And Shang-Chi is one of those ones that I've been looking forward to for ages. But obviously, you know, I'm not here to talk about the film. I'm here to talk about why the film exists and how it exists, because of the source material. And no, I'm chuffed to bits, actually, that it's good that it's been released when it is, because I know that this is one of the ones that was affected by the COVID pandemic. So it's good that it's finally out, and it's nice to see a character like Shang-Chi getting the sort of the airtime that I think he probably deserves.
Okay, because I'm coming into this not knowing that much about the character, other than really he's one of the stepping stones for Phase 4. We're getting a comic book origin story, and I mean, I know we will be discussing the film, just not with yourself, Aaron, but sorry, you didn't get that memo. I know we will be discussing the film, as I say, just not with yourself, but, you know, I was really impressed by it, and I think that's maybe a bit like Guardians of the Galaxy. The fact that I didn't know so much about it meant that I had no expectations to go in with. So this is where you're going to educate me now. See how I went from an insult, Aaron, and not inviting you to the party where we get to discuss movies, to moving to a compliment going, this is where you become the teacher, Aaron. So
smooth.
The stage is set. Give us a little bit about the comic book origins of the character. Not so much as on the page, but the creators and the people involved in the creation of Shang-Chi.
I mean, to be honest, a bit like you, Jim. Well, he's a character. I do know a bit about him, thankfully, but he's a character that over the years of reading comic books has never been somebody that I've put a lot of focus into or a lot of attention into. He's a class character when he appears, but during my time of reading comics, he's always just been a bit of a bit part character, really, in the comics. He sort of dips in and dips out. But going back to the thing is, it's those types of characters, a bit like you said with Guardians of stuff now, that are really the forefront of what Marvel are doing. So, going back to when he first appeared, it was back in the 70s, 1973, in Marvel Special Edition. And it was one of those issues that Marvel dipped their toe in the water trying to create lots of different first appearances around that time. And they didn't know how popular it was going to be. It was Steve Englehart was writing it at the time, and he was a massive, massive fan of all things Kung Fu. He had a huge want and desire to create a TV show, actually. Him and Jim Starling. And Jim Starling is the artist who did this issue. The two of them pitched it to Marvel initially for a TV show, but it didn't get the green light because at the time, the owner of Fu Manchu, who is Shang-Chi's dad, was owned by Warner Bros., which is obviously the owner of DC. So they couldn't do it at the time. So what they did was they created a character linked to Fu Manchu, and they created Shang-Chi, and they put it on the pages of a comic book. So, which is pretty cool. It's a cool idea. They based the likenesses on Bruce Lee. They based the idea, from the 70s boom of, because karate and kung fu in the 70s in America was humongous. You just look at the films that are out there, you look at the comics that were out there, everything was, aimed at an audience that was, loving things like Bruce Lee. So it made sense for them to dip their toe in the water and try something that was a wee bit different, because in the comics, there wasn't really anything else like that at the time. So they introduced it in the 70s. And I think they very quickly realized that they were on to a winner, because Marvel in that era would have pitched maybe 3 or 4 issues, see how it went. It got a 125 issue run in that first run. And, that's a 10-year solid bulk of a comic run. And that's not the going rate for comics, unless you're an A-lister like Avengers or Hulk or Iron Man or whatever it might be. So the fact that what they would consider a B-list character was able to really hit the mainstream showed the popularity of the character. And that really formed the basis of the Shang-Chi that we know now, that's obviously appearing in things like the films and things like that. So let's say the characters had longevity, but over the past, like as I say, through my reading, I'm 31, and after that run stopped in, I think it was 1984, and Master Kung Fu stopped, he appeared in things like Avengers and Secret Avengers, but he only ever appeared for certain issues. He never really had any more runs until 2019 there. So for 35 years or so, he sort of went away in terms of his own solo run. So I think they decided when the film was released to create a few comic runs to coincide with that. And obviously we'll get to those soon, because some of those are actually recommended reads for certainly dipping, getting you an idea of the origin story and things like that. But that's where he all came from, and that's how the idea came about for Shang-Chi. So it was all based on a time when karate and kung fu was the in thing in America.
Who would be the key illustrators? You've mentioned it there, that kind of iconic image that we have with a character like Shang-Chi.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jim Starling gave us the look of Shang-Chi that we know today. I mean, he came up with the idea and the concept along with Steve Englehart. But after that, there was 2 or 3 artists that really took a slightly different view. I think it was called Paul Gulacy, actually. It was him who said when he started drawing, when he had talked to Jim Starling, whoever it was, he said that it was based on, as I say, the likeness of Bruce Lee. But more in the recent runs, there's been a couple of different runs that have happened recently, and the names of the artists, they're Asian artists, and they are fantastic, but they have given it more of a, not that old style karate look, more of a very prim and proper version of Shang-Chi, and it's a slightly different look, but I think it's more in tune and more in keeping with with the world and society we live in. It's not a stereotypical look of some karate kung fu Western, like a westernized version really of them. So it's nice to see that they're using the Asian artists as well, who have a better understanding clearly of of what what the character would actually look like and things like that. So a few of the artists that in the runs that are going on today are fantastic, but I would say the most influential artist would be Jim Starlin, because it gives him the look that, as I say, we're all familiar with.
Okay, so that leads us nicely then. What would be some of the iconic covers? What would be the reads that you would recommend people seek out? Not so much in the newer runs, we will come to that, but what would be, looking back through the collection of materials available for Shang-Chi, what would be, if people are looking at this from 2 points of view, from looking at it from just, to read, to know more about the characters? I know you've mentioned about the run, but also then if people were looking from, how dare they, a monetary perspective and say they've got a couple of issues, what are the issues that for you as a retailer that you would love to see someone dropping in to your shop and saying, what's this worth?
The biggest issue that in terms of value, so we'll go through two things. The biggest issue in terms of value is obviously, like with most characters nowadays, it's either first appearance or their death of a character. They were touched on the first appearance of Shang-Chi, and as I say, it was the Marvel Special Edition, issue 15. It's an issue we've had in the shop a couple of times. It's not a very common issue because it was in issue 15 of a run that, as I say, it wasn't like it was an Avengers run. It was a different run that was always introducing new characters. They were trying every single issue to introduce somebody, whether it be Jack of Hearts or Shang-Chi, just throwing something and hope that it's stuck. And because of that, it wasn't a massively sought after run at the time, so not many people were buying it. So because of that, the scarcity nowadays, obviously it's harder to find, and it's obviously even harder to find in good condition because the people who were buying it at the time were just buying it to read, because that's what comics were for, obviously. But that issue commands, I mean, it's humongous value, because when we opened, we've had it, I say, over the years, we've had it in various states of undress. We've had it in nice condition, we've had it in super condition, we've had it in poor condition, but nowadays the issue can range anywhere between, as I say, it's always about condition, but anywhere between, £500 right through to £5,000, obviously, if it's in super high grade. Now, the film has had an impact on that, obviously, as well, because when a film gets released, or when a film's even mentioned or optioned or announced, people start scrambling. People start thinking, I want to get the first appearance of him, her, whatever, straight away. They want to get that. So at the time when this was announced, and I think it was 2019, I mean, I know from my childhood, there was always talk of a Shang-Chi film. I remember that there was talk of Brandon Lee doing it at one point. I think it was that late 80s or whenever it was. I remember thinking at the time when I heard about that, after the fact, so I thought he would have been brilliant at it. But there's always been talk of a Shang-Chi film, but when this one was announced at when the Marvel do all the big announcements, the book rocketed. Now, and it hasn't let off. There hasn't been a dip in it. So if you're looking through your collection, have a look for the first appearance, because it is one that obviously we're always looking to bring it in, and it's one that we could sell every day of the week at the minute if we had it. But it's a big issue, and it's a strange one. So if you're going through your boxes, everybody always thinks it's issue ones or issue 100 or 500 of these things are valuable. It's issue 15 of Marvel Special Edition, so keep an eye just in case you've got it. But yes, it's worth good money. In terms of the value side of things, there's other books that over the years that are just good reads, and that's the thing that I'm in it for. Obviously, yes, as a retailer, we want to sell the big books, and it's nice to have them.
Nice save, Aaron. There, nice save. It's like you're in it for the stories, not for the money. I was just gonna say, if someone, you're just about to celebrate your 7th birthday, as being open. If someone came down to you on your 7th birthday and went, "Here's that issue. I was watching you on Facebook talking about that. There's that issue in mint condition." You'd be like, "You know what, mate? Just don't worry about the money. It's the story I'm really in for." I know.
Well, do you know what? See, as much as that story, in fact, as much as that book is massively valuable, the story in that book, because I read it reprinted. It's been reprinted many times. It's been reprinted in collective versions as well. It's a cracking first. Origin stories sometimes are born. They're not always good. And I haven't seen the film, so I don't know how the touch on the origin of Shang-Chi in it. But in the comic, the origin of Shang-Chi is brilliant, because it starts off that his dad sets him out to kill a 90-year-old man. And when Shang-Chi, because his dad tells him, this is the worst guy in the world, you need to kill this guy, he's awful, he's this, he's that. And Shang-Chi's been brought up by him to think that his dad is all loving, all powerful, and he would do all the right things. But when he gets to this old man, Petrie, he sees automatically that he's thinking, why does my dad want me to kill a 90-year-old man here? There's something not quite right. And it's a story that's straight away, that's one of the first couple of pages, you're automatically filled with a sense of, God, this character's got a heart. Because a lot of times, comic book characters are hard to relate to sometimes. And he's one very quickly, you sort of think, fair play to him. And then I say that, he then karate chops the guy and kills him because he has to do what his dad tells him. But as he's leaving, Dennis Nielsen, who is friends with his mum, he comes in and he tells him about how bad of a guy's dad was. And it goes on to really set the scene for how Shang-Chi would become the sort of the epitome of all good, all powerful, the epitome of what he thought his dad was. He becomes that person. And it's a nice first introductory to that character. So that's why, as a first issue, as I say, as valuable as it is, it's actually a cracking read. But that idea, the first issue, I'm really sure that ends with something like he said, his dad says to him, I'm going to set all the evil in the world with you. And Shang-Chi just goes back to him and says, listen, Dad, the next time that we meet, we're going to be enemies. And then that's how it ends. And you're like, what? This is class. So that was, as I say, genuinely, I did save that because you see, I made it sound much better than it's just a value there, Jim. You like that? It is genuinely a cracking read. And it went on to lead for things like, he became somebody who the Avengers looked to. And a lot of the stories, like Secret Avengers, they go to Shang-Chi to really to help save the world. At the time, Iron Man and Captain America are trying to get people to join the Avengers. There's times around Civil War as well. They need to fight there's a lot of superheroes are obviously divided. Everybody knows the story of Civil War now. And they have to get a team who would go out essentially as bounty hunters to get the people who are fighting against the Registration Act. And around that time, there's some cracking runs with Shang-Chi. But throughout, as I say, he sort of just dips in and out. One of the best issues of comic books that I've ever read was a Free Comic Book Day comic in, God, I think it was 2011, whatever. There's not that many of them. I'll find it and I'll link it to it. But it was 2011, I think it was, and it was a Free Comic Book Day issue of Spider-Man. And the whole issue is it's like Yoda with Luke Skywalker. It's Shang-Chi teaching Spider-Man how to fight. So everything that you see in the films and the comic books of, Spider-Man doing all his cool stuff, he actually learns it all from Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi's his mentor, his tutor, and that whole issue's class. So that's another really good read. And then, as I say, there's things that I know we should touch on the modern reads because they are tonally very, very different to what's went on in the past. They're far more in keeping. He joins the Agents of Atlas, who are an all Asian team to help fight the 10 Rings, which I think's picked up on in the film. I think the 10 Rings is one of the big focuses. So there's lots of really cool stories that are going on now, which if you've either watched the film or you're wanting to get into the film, there's good places right now to start because obviously Marvel are clever and they're creating stories now that are giving you backstory to who the character is, And the one other thing I will say, based on if you're trying to dip your toe in the water, if you're looking for more information about the likes of the 10 Rings, it's a concept and an idea that was first in the Mandarin comics. So Mandarin's another evil, cool character. But if you're looking more information on that, don't necessarily go down the route of Shang-Chi. Look more back into the back issues of Mandarin, and it'll give you an idea about what the 10 Rings are.
And don't watch Iron Man 3, but we will come back to that when we're talking about the film itself. I know you've kind of touched on it there, but right now we're 2021. We've just had the film released. It's done really well. It's been, I think, one of the biggest successes at the box office post-pandemic, or in the current pandemic, I really should say. So from people watching or who've just watched the film, what are the reads right now? I mean, is there any runs that are currently on or maybe that haven't been out that long that you could maybe say, here's a nice jumping on point if you want to pick this up in our store?
The two that come to mind, they're really in the last 10 years, there's only really been 2 or 3 solo Shang-Chi runs. There was one 2017, was a one-shot, and it was CM Punk, the wrestler CM Punk. He tried to write comics for a wee while, and because he's a mixed martial artist, he wrote a brilliant Shang-Chi series, or a one-shot. But in the last 2 years, in 2019, they released a series, and it was just called Shang-Chi. It was a 5-part miniseries, And they released it at the time. It was it was probably actually the first victim of COVID in terms of the comic world. It was supposed to be released 2019, and obviously it got pushed back and delayed, and for obvious reasons. But that 5-part series was supposed to coincide with the release of the film, and it focuses more about Shang-Chi's family, his family life, because the dad, who was Fu Manchu and then had to change it to Zhang Zhu, he had other children that Shang-Chi never knew about. So it's really him going to find out that he has brothers and sisters, that some are evil, some are not so evil, some are brilliant. And it's about him looking after and starting to lead a council of evil to try to turn them good, really. So it's a lovely story, but it gives you a really good origin into all of the characters that you probably see in the film. So it's a nice introductory 5-part miniseries, and it's quite a short rerun, so it's a good one. If you're not even familiar with reading comics, it's a great place to jump in. But the run that's currently ongoing, it's only issue 4 is out this Wednesday. It's only up to issue 4, and it's been brilliant. Again, I'm not a massive, I haven't read Shang-Chi all my life, but anytime that I have read any of the issues he's in, he always is one of the standout characters. But this solo run it's one of the reads of the year actually so far for me. It's only 4 issues in, but it's more like, I don't know if you've ever read them, but it's Marvel every year they seem to do, Deadpool versus the Marvel Universe, or the Punisher kills the Marvel Universe. This, although it's just called Shang-Chi, is actually really Shang-Chi versus the Marvel Universe. In every issue, you see all of the big superheroes, and he's leading that council that I was talking about to fight off the evil, but also to team up with the good. And it's been brilliant. It's been unreal, and it's very well written. I say the artwork is done by I can't pronounce the name of I think is it Philip? I can't remember who's doing it, but it's been a brilliant run so far, and we do have copies available in the shop, Jim. So if anybody would like to jump on board, we've got those mini series that we talked about, but also the current run is it's fantastic.
And is that monthly? Is it bi-monthly? What way is that running?
At the minute, it's monthly. So 1 issue a month. And as I say, generally each issue's left on a bit of a cliffhanger every issue. So it's been great. And the feedback so far has been brilliant for it. So I think it'll do very well. I don't think it's going to be a short run. And I think the popularity of the miniseries was a good indicator that there was a demand again for, a series like the original that ran for 100 issues. I'm not saying this will by any stretch, but in fact, comics these days generally don't get past about 15, 20 issues. But as this one in particular has been really, really good fun. And as I say, just gives you a wee bit more about his origin, but also it gives you a really, really good view of all the Marvel characters that you don't normally, and unless you're reading an A-list book like Avengers, you don't get to see them all coming together ever. So it's been really, really good fun. So yes, if you're down on Saturday, if you're down any day, we'll be able to get you sorted for sure.
Okay, all good stuff. So Aaron Flanagan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's my chat with Aaron Flanagan, and as we said there, Aaron and the Comic Book Guys are celebrating their 7th birthday this weekend, so get down to the store, but if not, Aaron will hate this bit, Brian, but other comic book stores are available. I didn't say that when I was on the interview with him, but other comic book stores are available. There are other comic book stores in Belfast, but yeah, Aaron's still our comic book guru. So that's enough of us talking around everything, Brian. Let's talk about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. We will play a clip in just a minute, but just generally, we kind of can venture spoilerific if we so wish. But generally, how excited were you about the release of this film prior to watching it?
Very. I'm not going to say that I read the comic a lot, but I know of the character. And he was always, like friends would say to me, it's Marvel's Bruce Lee. And I'm like, okay, right. Well, because he was created in 1973, I believe. So around about the time Bruce died, and it was like Bruce was at his height. So I'm like, okay, I'm on board. Add to that the fact that the cast then came out, and the surrounding cast that are Hong Kong legends, really, and I knew a few of the choreographers and stuff. And then I seen the trailer, and there was a little clip of the bus fight, which I'm sure we'll get into. And that little pose he does, and I'm going, that's Jackie Chan. Well, you're ticking all my boxes there. So I was really, really excited about this film. It seemed to be almost made for me. So Yeah.
Yeah, like you, I mean, as I've already said earlier in this pod, I am probably more from a comic book reading point of view, probably more DC, probably more 2000 AD if I'm really honest. But I do love DC, so I really didn't come into this movie with much knowledge of the character, and as I've already mentioned with Aaron, so far those have been the Marvel movies I've enjoyed the most. When I don't come in with my preconceived notions, or, well, this is going to happen, oh, there's that character, he does this, or they become that, that's what they end up doing, the 10 rings, oh, that's what part they play within the MCU. I knew nothing about this character, and well, I mean, it's not a spoiler, we've kind of hinted at it. I think we're both really positive about this, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was a nice way. I know we've had Black Widow, and maybe you might want to talk a little bit about Black Widow. I know there's now all the kind of mess that's kind of resulted in the way that Disney have released that now, that have cast a shadow over the film with the fact that Scarlett Johansson is not happy, and there's probably merits to why she's not happy about what's happening with that project when you compare to what some of her male counterparts have been paid over the years and the rewards they've got from some of the big, the kind of massive numbers those films have done at the box office. And I don't want to go too much down that, but Black Widow was fine. It was a serviceable MCU film. It just felt like it was another cog in the machine. I don't know what you felt about it, Brian. I enjoyed it. I thought Florence Pugh was great. I'm delighted that she's in the MCU. I think she's just a tremendous, tremendous actress. Yeah. But this just felt like it was trying to do the Winter Soldier thing all over again, but had none of that depth. But this film for me was just coming in, as I say, blind, don't know that much about it, and just enjoyed the hell out of it. I know we're going to play a clip in just a second, but very quickly, were you a fan for Black Widow to start this Phase 4? I think Phase 4 we're in. Where did you rate that as an opener for Phase 4?
Well, I enjoyed it, but I will agree it was somewhat formulaic, especially the last big act. A big set piece. I'm like, well, okay, that might have been better, It didn't break new ground. Well, you're dealing with a character who you've told in previous movies isn't there anymore, and you're trying to do an origin movie of a character that's already established. So it was a bit difficult anyway. It got me back into the cinema, Jim, which I would champion it, and I sat there and after a long time away and thoroughly enjoyed the spectacle of it. But it wasn't breaking new ground. I'll agree with that with you, and it's not Shang-Chi,
Yeah, I think we can definitely say that Shang-Chi is breaking new ground for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And on that lovely note, let's play a clip of the film.
Okay, let's get you ready to fight. Wait, what? Well, multi-platform global operation. Every fight live stream on the dark web. Thousands of viewers placing bets as we speak. This is gonna take your brand to a whole new level.
I think there's been some sort of confusion.
I like your spike face.
Usually, you gotta fight your way to Central Ring. But a viral star like you, front the line, baby.
I'm not here to fight anybody. Okay, I'm looking for my sister, Shushalin.
Never heard of her. We just lost a fight at the last minute, so you get the next slot. Nice one, Helen.
So that's a clip of Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings. Brian, we've talked about it enough. What's your thoughts towards the film?
Well, no surprise, I loved it. I thought I was worried about the first 45 minutes to an hour, because I thought some of the comedy wasn't landing for me. And I thought, okay, it's good, but where is it going? But a lot of the times you're in the cinema, Jim, and you can kind of you watch enough movies, you kind of know where it's going. It's always really nice to be surprised. And the last half hour to 45 minutes of the movie just went, it totally surprised me. I'm not going to say it switched genre as much, but I just thought, yeah, this is what Black Widow, as we talked, didn't have. This is like the end set piece is stunning. Everyone gets their moments, I think it has a brilliant bad guy, which if you list your top 5, even if you want to just do Marvel movies, they're probably your top 5 because the bad guys are really good. The villains are really interesting. I thought he was fantastic. Tony Leung, who's, how long he's been in some of the great Hong Kong movies and stuff. He was fantastic. Interesting to hear his English voice. At one point, I'm going, is it ADR'd? Is it not him? Is it dubbed? But then I've since seen interviews of him speaking English, and no, he just has that gravitas, like that Morgan Freeman type. You just read me to sleep. He's really, really, really good in it. I thought the one thing I come out of it after a few days of thinking about it, which is always good when you think about a movie, is how well directed it is, as opposed to other Marvel movies. Destin Daniel Cretton, I can't. I mean, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I've never really seen anything.
Just say it with confidence, Brian. Just say it with confidence.
Okay. Well, DDC, as I call him, or DDG. He's not. I've never really seen anything he's done. I know he done Just Mercy there with. Can't remember who's in that actually. I think Brie Larson's in it, but anyway, I've never seen anything he's done. But the whole motif of flashbacks, and then further flashbacks that kind of elongate said flashbacks, so you're getting it basically it drip feeds the audience the information, which I always think is brilliant, rather than just slapping you over the face with it. It's saying to you, right, I know it's a big Marvel superhero movie, but bring your intelligence along as well for a wee bit. You're going to need it. Standout scenes are all the action's great in it, and it's more John Wick and less the Bourne Legacy, the Bourne movies, which are terrible action movies. I'll die on that hill. Just the way they're filmed, they're just not filmed very well. They're too shaky. But the fight on the bus is so Jackie Chan, and it's interesting that a lot of the stunts were done by Brad Allen, who passed away unfortunately, and he was the first real Australian guy. I think he was the first real white guy that worked with Jackie Chan's stunt team, and you can see it. It's all over the screen. That using your surroundings, that every hit looks like it hurts. But equally, then you had the flashback scenes that were very Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, with a lot of wushu and a lot of movement, and then that kind of played into his arc. Even if you want to use his fight scenes as an arc, he kind of had to stop being so hard and short and punchy, and let more of his mum take over in her arc, really, to end up winning the day. So I just love that. I'm like, yeah, you had me. If you're using fight choreography to tell a story, I'm on board. So yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with anything you're saying. Destin Daniel Cretton, as we're going to go with, or DDC. I have been really impressed. I mean, Just Mercy, I've seen. I wouldn't say it's an outstanding film, but it is a well-directed film. And I mean, I'll always watch anything that Michael B. Jordan's in. And we also did Short Term 12 as well, which I think's fab. He was an interesting choice to direct this. I will say that, when you look back at his back catalogue, maybe like a Black Panther might seem like a more fitting fit for that director, without kind of venturing too much into tropes and cliches. But that's the kind of vibe I would have expected. But I thought he did a tremendous job. The action sequences are really well handled. The sequence on the bus, it's amazing, and it's slick. And you mentioned John Wick. I do like the John Wick films. I do think the writers and the producers and probably the fans think that the character's a little bit cooler than what he actually is. But for me, it's almost too cartoonish in the John Wick stuff, because it's choreographed to near perfection. And I don't have an issue with that, but it is ultra stylized. It's beautiful to watch, but it's very, very choreographed. And just in what you mentioned there, the fact that you get this sense of things, there's risk involved here. Yes, okay, we know Shang-Chi, he's not going to die. We know that. That's, every hero, well, unless you watched Avengers Endgame, you're going to be in for a real shock when you're watching Tony and things. But I like the fact that it is choreographed to perfection, but it doesn't look that way. I know that sounds like a real roundabout way of saying things, and maybe doesn't make sense. It is choreographed, and you know they've worked at it and worked at it and worked at it, but it doesn't have that ultra polished look, because that's probably not what they're trying to go for. I thought it was fab. I would say, like you, I don't think the comedy lands, but that saying, I mean, I probably will get her name wrong. Awkwafina. I mean, I love her. I just think she's absolutely fab.
Yeah.
She is here to be the comedic character. There's no getting away from that, but she still has her moment, as you've alluded to, in the film's final sequence. I know we have said we're going to get slightly spoilerific in this, and what I've always loved about Marvel and the Marvel MCU is things that are maybe problematic or have been problematic for them, they have tried to retcon, they have tried to address, and we've seen them before. I think, is it in the first Thor movie, we see the Infinity Gauntlet, and then in Thor Ragnarok, they're like, Kate Blanchett's character, oh, that's a fake, that's not right. So that's been dealt with. You know, I mentioned it with Aaron. There was issues, you know, regarding the character of Shang Chi, and we do have issues that relate back to Iron Man 3, and I love that the film just embraces it and just goes with it and doesn't try to hide things underneath the curtain, or doesn't hide it underneath the carpet. It basically says, yeah, okay, I think, wasn't it Hail to the King, I think was the little short that Marvel did, which I thought was great. So it's not a spoiler to say he's not in any of the advertising, but Sir Ben Kingsley is back as Trevor.
Yeah. Totally chewing scenery. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought I just like the fact that Marvel, rather than trying to brush things underneath the carpet and say, okay, well, that really didn't happen in Iron Man 3. We had that version of the Mandarin, and as a comic book fan, I mean, I don't know if we've really talked about Iron Man 3. I kind of like Iron Man 3.
It's my favorite, and I because, excuse the pun, but it's Tony has the best arc in that movie. You know, he has everything, he loses everything, he gets it back. You know, that he doesn't do that. Well, he doesn't have anything, and he gets it in the first one. Second one's just, I'm Tony Stark. Look at me, I'm awesome. You know, Mickey Rourke's got a whip. But the third one, it is an arc, and that reveal of the Mandarin not being the Mandarin and it being a puppet type of thing annoyed so many people. I remember slapping my knee going, "This is genius," because if you wanted to, and this is what Marvel do really well, some characters that work on the page will not work on the big screen. They just won't. I'd be very surprised if Galactus ever shows up and he's a big giant purple guy who lifts the planet up and eats it like an apple. It's not going to work like that. You know, it'll be something else. So the Mandarin was always problematic anyway. You know, so even just as an Asian stereotype, it was problematic, you know. So the fact that they pulled the move there, and now they're doubling down almost in this, you know, is brilliant. Which then further validates Tony Leung's character as Shang-Chi's father as being the big bad who's always lurking in the shadows. Because why haven't we heard about him before? Because he doesn't want us to know about him, you know, and he's letting these things happen and in the background, but he is that powerful. I really got there was a Shang-Chi new Avenger, let's call him, a new hero for the Marvel Universe, but also got, whoa, that's a new big bad there, you know. And that's, I would have loved to have seen more of him. I would have loved to have had a whole link with him through the movies, you know, like you did maybe a Thanos or a Loki, you know. But yeah, no, that was great. Great.
What I loved about his character, and I would rate him up there in top Marvel villains, is that I suppose in a way he is out to take over the world, but his motivation by the time the film reaches its latter stages, it's far removed from that. It's love in that sense is motivating him, and trying to save someone who's from beyond the grave, and that's something we as viewers can relate to. It's much easier, and I think probably more terrifying to an extent than someone who just wants to take over the world. That's why, I mean, I've loved, in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like Michael Keaton's Vulture is a more engaging villain for me than, say, Kate Blanchett's in Thor Ragnarok.
100%. Or indeed Michael B. Jordan's character in Black Panther. That's why that movie works, because there's two sides of the same coin going on there. There's just different paths. That's what that movie is. And you use the word yourself, relatable. If you can relate to the character, I know friends who turned around to me and thought Thanos was right. Let's get rid of half of people. And I'm like, well, no, he's getting rid of them. And it's like, no, he was right. There's too many people in the world. And I'm like, oh, right, okay. So that's, they probably voted for Brexit, in fairness. But so if you can get a relatable villain, then you're constantly questioning the motivation, and therefore, hopefully the hero does as well and learns a bit, rather than just big guy punches big guy.
Yeah, I thought he was fab. But the other thing I will say, and I don't think we've talked about her at all yet, but we also have Shang-Chi's sister, who's just fab. I think is the actress Ming'er Zhang. Zhang. I thought she was fab, and I was worried. As you kind of go on, I was kind of worried. Oh, this is going to be a very male-centric feature, but in a similar way to something like Shazam. What I love about what they've done with Shang-Chi, that's a lot of Shangs, and then Shazam and Shang-Chi. What I love, it feels like it's very much part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's happy to be its own thing. I know there will come a film in this phase. We have got it in every phase of Marvel's cinematic universes that sacrifice their own narrative to be part of the bigger picture, to set up things. Now that might change now that we've got the TV series as well. Loki has definitely set a lot up for phase 4. You've mentioned, we have Kang, he makes a brief appearance, albeit a variant of Kang. Spoiler to anybody who hasn't seen Loki. I know that Kang's going to be showing up in the next Ant-Man film, which I'm actually glad to see that character being given a bigger role within the cinematic universe, because so often the last two, Ant-Man and then Ant-Man and the Wasp, they felt like little palate cleansers. They felt like they've just been like, we've just had Avengers Infinity War, everything, the stakes have never been higher, let's just throw out Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is a Marvel movie aimed at a younger audience. There's no getting away from that. I'm glad to see that character being given much more. And hey, maybe possibly Paul Rudd might age a little. The guy just doesn't bloody age. I don't know why.
There are some absolutes in the world, and him never aging is one of them, unfortunately.
Because I watched Clueless. We were watching Clueless for the TV show a couple of weeks ago, and he's just, you don't need to digitally de-age him. He's just Paul Rudd. He just doesn't change. But I like the fact that Shang-Chi sets up a lot of stuff that, if they wanted to, they could carry on Shang-Chi and not really be bothered too much about the bigger picture and the bigger world. I know the post-credits thing, which we'll talk about in the post-credits, brings everything back and reminds you that it is part of the MCU and it's a big part of the bigger picture. But was that something that worked really well for you? The fact that it's allowed to be its own thing, and it was allowed to be its own yes, there's nods, there's a lot of Easter eggs there, but it was allowed to be its own thing, and it's allowed to be its own thing with a lot of confidence.
Yes, absolutely. It's as an origin of a character, it you think you have to kind of do that. You can't just, although other characters have been introduced in team movies, I suppose, but yes, this is, and it's just a different. It's more ground. He's more ground level hero, which sounds weird if you know the last half hour of the movie, but he is that street level kind of. He doesn't shoot lasers from his eyes. He has a lot of power, but I love that it's martial arts based, and it's the training he had. And he's known in Marvel. He's the best hand-to-hand combat fighter in Marvel universe. Better than Cap, better than even Taskmaster, I suppose. But so he's I think it it needed to be that before, and that's what the stings at the end are about. You really, the post-credit scenes. You know, you want, ultimately what I'm saying is Simu Lau, I think it is, who plays Shang Chi, has so much charisma that I'm like, I want to see more of this guy. You know, in the Marvel universe and outside, I thought A Star Is Born is what I really thought. You know, there is a bit of Bruce in there, and there's a bit of Jackie in there. And when I say that, I'm going, oh, he just knows. He loves those movies. And the fact that he tweeted in 2018, Marvel, I'm ready, type of thing, hashtag Shang-Chi, and he ends up, it's the ultimate how it started, how it's going, where he's ended up with his own Marvel movie. Really, really good. When we're talking about villains again, what you don't want is that they overshadow the hero as well. And there's a lot going on in the movie with, as you say, the female representation and stuff, and a lot of Oriental faces and stuff on screen. He still has his moment. It's still him at the end. So Michelle Yeoh again is the other one I haven't mentioned, who's an absolute legend in Hong Kong. I mean, I'm watching her and going, you worked with Jackie Chan, which means you worked with Brad Allen, who done the stunts, which means there's Jackie's on screen somewhere. It's Hong Kong. It's even if it's done by Hollywood, there's a bit of Hong Kong in there, I'd welcome a sequel tomorrow. I hope they announce it. It's doing well in the box office. I know it has problems in China because of the original, Shang-Chi's original father in the printed page was Fu Manchu, which we all know how bad of a character, a racial stereotype he was. So hopefully it'll get released in China, because I think, I assume that Asian people would love to see Asian representation and Asian heroes on screen. That's going to be boys and girls, because they're up there. His sister is his equal in many ways. I loved it. But again, if you want to talk about the post credit scenes, I can see him, rocking about with the other Avengers.
Yeah, we will keep the post-credits to the post-credits of this pod, because I think that's just it just keeps people listening right to the end. You've mentioned Michelle Yeoh, who I love. I mean, I probably the first time I became aware of her was probably Tomorrow Never Dies, if I'm honest. Tomorrow Never Dies, I think she's such an underrated Bond girl, and I know people hate that term, but I think, in what she does on screen, it's very different than what predated her, and it's very different even than what has come after her as well. We haven't really had a Bond character like that, or Bond girl like that. I think she was, and it's maybe only in recent years when I've been revisiting those films, the Pierce Brosnan films. I know we did a Pierce Brosnan retrospective a couple of months ago, and I think Tomorrow Never Dies is the one up there with GoldenEye that I think I love the most, and probably feels more relevant now than it ever did back then. And then you've mentioned earlier on Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is just a stunning piece of cinema. I've probably told this story in this podcast before. Many years ago, I'm from Omagh, out Hicktown, and we wanted to go see, my friend Chris and I wanted to go see Crouching Tiger. Nowhere in Omagh was showing it, so we had to get up to Belfast. We thought we had it timed all to perfection. We would go up at this time we'd get this bus, get up to the Dublin Road. I think it might have still been Virgin at that point, and would watch the film and then get the bus back home, and would be like, great, would watch it. But we didn't give time for trailers, adverts. So literally 20 minutes before the film ended, we were like, fuck, we have to go. We have to get our bus. None of us drove back then. It's like, we have to get our bus back. And it's like, what the fuck do we do? I don't want to go. Well, we don't want to stay to Belfast. So we ended up, we saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in 2 parts. We had to go see it on one Saturday. We had to leave, really disappointingly, about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes before the end. And then the subsequent Saturday, we had to get another bus up. We got an earlier bus and got it to an early screening and saw the full film. And
that's just the power of cinema. You had to see the end of that movie. That's a good saying. It was working, that you needed to see it.
Yeah, and that was probably, if I'm honest, probably my introduction as that I can think of, really, into kung fu and into kind of that type of genre of cinema. And I know I was talking to Aaron Flanagan, and he was giving us the comic book 101 on the character, but this is a perfect point then for you, Brian, because I know in the past when we've done some kung fu movies, you know, you recommended Drunken Master. It was one of the first screenings we ever did at Banterflix when we were doing the old beer and pizza nights at the Beanbag Cinema, and that was your pick that we got to. So what would you recommend from anybody who's watching this and now maybe wants to dip their toes in some kung fu classics? What would you recommend they seek out?
Wow, that's
no pressure at all.
Yeah. How long have you got? Well, if you want a Michelle Yeoh, a couple of Michelle Yeoh recommendations, she done a movie, and a lot of the martial arts is used in this, called Wing Chun, which is about the origin of that martial arts. She's great in it. She's also great in Police Story 3, Super Cop, which essentially, you know, Jackie Chan hands her the franchise of Super Cop. She does an amazing stunt on want to say a motorbike on a train, land on a moving train. There you go. That movie is. So anything Jackie, I suppose if people would you know, there's traditional kung fu that Jackie does, your Drunken Masters, your Fearless Hyenas and stuff like this. But if you want something like the fight in Shang Chi on the bus, then any of the police stories would be totally worth watching. Also, Who Am I, which is really, really underrated Jackie Chan film. It's just stunning. It literally uses everything that is around him to entertain you and to fight and to beat his rivals, you know. And then also for Jackie, suppose any of the Operation Condor movies. Also, I've mentioned him a few times because unfortunately, R.I.P. I know that Shang-Chi's dedicated him at the end, but Brad Allen done a lot of the stunts on this. He done a lot of the fight choreography. Sorry, he has a fight scene with Jackie in a movie called Gorgeous, which was named after yourself, Jim. He does a fight scene with, and you could probably get it on YouTube or go to my Twitter because I shared it. And basically, it's a fight scene with Brad Allen and Jackie Chan. And if you can stay in the pace with Jackie Chan, you know you're good. So this guy was a great martial artist. You know, away from Jackie, you're talking. Honestly, anything Scott Adkins is doing, I think Scott Adkins is one of the best martial artists working today. You would know him as the guy who gets kicked into another dimension in the first Doctor Strange. He's one of the kind of the villain's henchmen type of thing. I think he broke Cumberbatch's rib on that movie. I'm really sure. I could be wrong, but he's going to be in the next John Wick, so you'll know him from that. I'm trying to think what else you'd have known him from. So he does a lot of Channel 5 movies, but they're better than that, if that makes any sense. You know, he's always that guy. He's in the Expendables. He's the guy that the real English kind of soldier guy in Expendables 2, I think. That what do you call him? Oh my God, his name escapes me. Bald head. Uses the knives in the movie. English speaker.
Not Statham.
Statham fights him. Yeah, Statham fights him in Expendables 2. That's burned as well. And you can tell, like your man, I'm getting that feeling from Simu Liu, who does Shang-Chi, is he knows his stuff because he's a big fan of martial arts. So you can tell that's where it's coming from, you know. So if you just start with Jackie, the lineage is there, you know. You can kind of just, you know, someone's been in a movie with Jackie, check out their movie. They're probably that good, you know. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on screen with them.
Yeah, because you just made me remember that one of the last screenings we ever had planned to do was actually Police Story. Yeah. We actually had planned to do that, and we had to cancel it just because of well, I heard someone talking about it on Radio 5. Instead of calling it the pandemic, they're just calling it the panini. So because of the panini, we had to cancel. Hopefully, we will be able to return to that screening because I enjoyed when we did Drunken Master, 4 or 5 years ago. It was one of the early stages. I was surprised at the audience we found, and I enjoyed dipping our toes in kung fu movies, and it's something nowhere near to the level that yourself, Brian, enjoys them and could talk about them, you know, all day with a certain degree of knowledge. I've dipped my toes in just kind of what I've heard over the years. I've dipped some Bruce Lee, some Jackie Chan, but I definitely think watching a film like this, like Shang-Chi, I would like to see that there might be a chance for then people who, if they like that type of film, they might be tempted to go and see what's come in the past. But yeah, I mean, all great choices, Brian. You know, there's a great array of choices you've given us there. I'm trying to think, anything else you want to talk about? You know, I know we've mentioned cameos. We have Wong showing up here from Doctor Strange, and we have, although I didn't notice this, is it the Abomination?
Yes.
I didn't. Yeah, it's kind of a new look. Clearly, Tim Roth will not be playing that character going forward in any way. But I just assumed it was random Gribbly, but there was someone I was at the cinema with who was like, "Oh no, that's the Abomination." That person that's always at those screenings, who'll always tell you that's that character, that's the role. Oh, I don't know who that person is. Well, that's the most important person within the entire MCU. How could you not know that person? But yeah, as I say, I enjoyed the fact that it was very much its own thing, and I think for an origin story within the MCU, I think that Shang-Chi is up there. I would put it up there with the likes of Black Panther for an origin story for a character, and the difference being with Black Panther, we had the character maybe once or twice on screen beforehand. We definitely had him on screen for Civil War. I'm not certain if we'd had him, maybe it was just the once, but for a character we've never seen before at all, I thought this was an absolutely fab job for an origin story.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And whets the appetite. You want to see more. You know, you want to see more of that character. Absolutely. So, and you know, if you want to go down to the diversity end of things, let's champion that there are Asian faces. And the number one in the world's biggest movie at the minute, you know, is primarily mostly Asian actors in it. And we did that with Black Panther, and rightly so. You know, so why not with this? And you could say with Black Widow, we did that with a lot of the female representation. You know, so hopefully long may it continue, and let's get him into the next big next big team up with the Avengers. But please, let's give him well, it's set up a wee bit for a sequel. So yeah, we'll talk about that, I'm sure. I loved it.
Yeah, unlike Black Widow, though, at least we don't have Ray Winstone going, "Yeah, I'm Russian general." That's my terrible. Well, it's no worse than Ray Winstone's in Black Widow. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think we're pretty much singing from the same hymn sheet, Brian. So I think we shall leave it there, and that's enough of us praising Shang-Chi. I can't, you know, as you say, we should praise a film that is bringing people out to the cinema during the panini, during the pandemic, and getting people's bums on seats and reminding us the joy of going to cinema and the shared cinematic experience. I know that Disney, I'm not quite sure what they're doing. I think after a certain period, this will go on to Disney Plus. I think it's something similar to what HBO Max does. I think maybe 2-3 months it's going to be going straight. It's not going to be as long as we've had before. And yeah, that's great. I mean, I'll be honest, bar maybe the Captain America stuff and maybe the Avengers movies, this might be one of the first Marvel films in a while. Genuine, and I'm saying this genuinely, even Endgame, I think Infinity War I've seen twice. Endgame I've only watched the once, if I'm honest. I haven't done the whole Marvel rewatch during the pandemic. Yeah. But this might be one of the first Marvel movies for a while I would actively seek out to watch again.
Yeah, true. I agree. Absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're singing from the same hymn sheet. So I think we'll bring this podcast to a close. So Brian Muholland, thank you very much.
Jim, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to see your face and hear your voice. And let's do it again. It was wonderful. Thank you.
This has been We Need to Talk About Movies. Thanks for listening. For more information, visit banterflix.com. See you next time.
So, Brian, post-credit stings. We have 2 post-credit stings. One that feels very much like it's going to be setting up, the more Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings sequel. And we also have one that feels like it's setting up more for Marvel Phase 4. Generally, what do you think we have? Your favourite, we have Captain Marvel back with the long hair too. And we also have Bruce Banner back, and he's not Smart Hulk anymore. He's just regular Bruce Banner. So we have questions. We have questions as to how that came about. Probably we're going to get those answered in She-Hulk when that eventually hits the small screen. And I think it's a couple of years. I think it's far down the line. I think She-Hulk is, but what else? We have a bit of karaoke with Wong. What's not to like? I'm intrigued to where this goes, because I don't know how knowledgeable you are, or how invested you are in the character of Shang-Chi. I know you said you weren't a massive fan, but have you an idea of where they're going to go with these 10 rings and this idea of the 10 rings, the aforementioned 10 rings? They're giving off a signal. We just don't know to what purpose. Do you have an idea in your head where you think they might go?
There's a few theories knocking around there. It could be something to do with the Celestials, which are tied to the Eternals, or it could be something to do with another big bad guy, which I think they've done that before. It could be Kang. It could be Fing Fang Foom, which is a big giant dragon that originally had the bracelets on rings on its fingers, But it's an alien dragon. Now that's even for Marvel, that's a bit out there. I don't know about that, but I don't know if these rings will be that. To me, the two end credit scenes, the more one that intrigues me is the one where that his sister kind of going, "Well, I'm not going to dismantle my father's empire. I'm going to do it my own way. I'm going to put my own sting on it." I mean, is she going to start doing the underground battles with even higher level? I mean, that's a TV show in itself. You could just do a versus show, and it could be this character versus this character, or are they going to go be at loggerheads again in the next one? I'd arguably watch him do street level Jackie Chan fights in the next movie and not have it a big, the end of the film is like Godzilla meets Dragon Ball Z meets Avatar, the Airbender Avatar. It's stunning. I mean, they're fighting on the back, kung fu in the back of dragons. You know what I mean? It's yes, let's have that. But can you do that again? Should you do that again? I don't know. I'm more intrigued with the one where Captain Marvel and Bruce Banner show up, is how he's in his human form. And the two theories I have is something to do with the time travel that they know to do, or is, which I think is more likely, is Doctor Strange just helping out all the Avengers with wee wishes, and has he asked him to be Bruce Banner again? But equally, his arm's still in a sling from that snap. So timing ways, where is this? It's before the next Spider-Man movie, I think, or before the second Spider-Man movie. So that's intriguing. And she looked great with the long hair again.
So look, that's us. We're out of time. So you've had our post-credit analysis of the post-credits for Shang-Chi. That is a tongue twister if ever there was one. So once again, Mr. Muholland, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. As always, stay beautiful.